All right. Well, I'm going to start us off. And if more people don't join us, I'd be surprised because usually we do have some ringers. But welcome to Teaching Conversations. This is, what is this, April 16th. And these are some kind of loosely structured conversations every other week about teaching during the pandemic. And today, I would like us to talk about the end of the semester. And again, it's loosely structured. So my topic is what to do for faculty and student wellness at the end of the semester. And we've been joking that the way through is retail therapy. And I don't know if we're going to come up with a better answer than that, but I do feel like the end of the semester, it's part of the university tradition that the end of the semester is this intense time of late nights and tremendous output. But this semester of all semesters has just been this wearing. It's almost like just a grinding, monotonous sound behind us, right? So I'd like us to think, Al, hello, glad you could join us. I'd like us to think about what we're doing for wellness, both for ourselves and our students at the end now. Not next Friday, but the Friday after, April 30th, I would like to call us all together and think about what would be good for the summer and for building towards next semester's teaching conversations. Over last summer, we produced a series of videos that I thought were just tremendous. Bob led us off on that. And I'm wondering, I'd like people to spend a little time thinking about what would be great to do this summer. Obviously, people need some time away from thinking about teaching, but what would be great to do this summer? And then, should we have a conference at the beginning of next fall semester to get things rolling and get people thinking again? But I would like us to make a strategic way forward, and I'd like us all to think about that. So that's for April 30th. For now, let's just talk about how we might wrap up this semester as healthfully as we can. I'll stop talking and let people think this through. Go ahead.
I mean, obviously, we basically canceled spring break. And besides retail therapy, the other classic thing is you go off on spring break and get away for a week and reset your brain. And that's an old tradition. And in April of every academic year, everybody is burned out and ready for the summer. So, I mean, nothing new, except that we really didn't get spring break and we were all cooped up. And I think more than anything that shows, and it's just time to get away, man. So, my wife and I just booked a trip to Hawaii, and I hope they let us in and everything's good. And, we got to get away and take a break. I mean, we all understand why the campus did what it did with spring break. But, saying in the college, we're not going to give homework that week and we're going to have one day during that week where we pause instruction really wasn't enough. Yeah. And everyone was cooped up as it was. And I mean, if we did it again, I would say, let's think some more about how to have the week off without saying go party in Miami, but still do something to get away.
Bob, do you think that we're going to next spring be in the same situation where we'll have to be forced to make this scheduling decision? Actually, we'll end up making it in the fall. But
I don't think anybody knows. I would hope not. I hope we're as back to normal as we can be, but who knows?
Yeah.
Well,
you are expressing common feelings, and I appreciate that.
I have to say, I think we should be enthusiastic to get back in the classroom in August, but mentally prepared for anything, because COVID is a wily enemy, and variants are the name of the game. So who knows what's going to happen? But I don't want to derail us with speculation on COVID. So I agree. Spring break seemed now maybe like a necessary evil or a bad medicine. But what are you folks doing this next 2-week period to encourage some kind of survival, some kind of wellness at the end? What are people thinking? Go ahead.
I have a plan. So the last things that I'm covering in my class are pretty intense. I mean, really intense, more intense than I expected because I ended up having to kind of change directions just to modernize some different methods for examining measurement systems. And that in and of itself was challenging enough. Plus the homework was honestly just too hard. So what I decided to do is instead of having 4 problems, I cut it back to 2. The two problems are still rigorous. They still the students will still demonstrate what it is I want them to learn and what I want them to be able to do. We also had a discussion about the homework before they're going to do the homework.
Excellent.
And I've been adding some things to the homework, like, here's what I'm looking for you to be able to do. And it's not telling them what to do, but really just making it more explicit instead of, hey, guess what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to be able to do, not just demonstrate in this because it's a professional master's, but when you're out in industry doing the thing that you do, you'll be able to do it. And so cutting that back, I think, was good. And then adding more of a template, so to speak. And I'm doing that for the last one too, which is arguably the hardest. I don't have a final, but I do have challenging assignments throughout the semester. And that last one is pretty tough. I'm also taking what I usually would put into one lecture, and I've cut it into 2. Because I've tried to just shove so much into their brains that I put that in 2, and it's taken the stress off, but it also allowed us to go just a little bit deeper into it and have a better and deeper understanding, and I believe it'll help us or help them have better learning outcome.
So Wendy, how did you make room for that?
I threw out stuff that I felt was not as necessary. It's always been part of the curriculum, but if I go back and look at the learning objectives for the class, I'm like, do they really need to know this for this class? And the answer to that was no, they don't. In fact, they're probably never going to use it. Okay, it's like cumulative sum and exponentially weighted moving average charts. Like, nobody uses that, okay? Because you know what? We're just going to use programmable logic control. We're not going to do all this crap by hand. Get a PLC programmer and just do that. There you go, Bob. He's like, yeah, electrical engineering, control systems.
Excellent. Scott.
Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of follow up on what Wendy just said. For those of you here who don't know me, I'm a learning experience designer in the Office for Academic and Learning Innovation. So I mostly do course design, but my background is in Italian studies, and I have an appointment with French and Italian and teach every fall semester. So the comment that I'm about to make kind of comes both from, teaching, but also supporting faculty in course design. So I wanted to say that, all of the things that you just said, Wendy, are terrific, but I think that it's really important for us to remember that these are really, really good lessons for all times, not just pandemic times. So what you were talking about is actually like developing more like a tighter alignment between your learning outcomes and what you're asking students to do, which is really good practice always, and like benefits students' mental health and wellness, which is really important now, but it's also always important. And another thing that I was going to say, which you just might find interesting, is that thinking about William, we were talking about sleep at the end of the semester. And I think that student sleep is something that's really, really important. And in my previous institution, which was Dartmouth College, we had someone in my office who was working with the learning data that was being harvested from Canvas. And so we had sort of ask Canvas, questions and then try to answer those questions. So one really interesting thing that we discovered was that 95% of students submit their assignments on Canvas within 10 minutes of the due time. So that means that 95% of the time, your students are going to be submitting their work within 10 minutes of what you set in Canvas. And the reason why I bring this up is that I think that we can really intelligently deploy the LMS to promote mental health. Because if you think about the fact that the default time for submission in Canvas is 11:59 p.m., and nobody knows that and is changing it in their assignment settings, that means that you're putting students in a position of having to sort of navigate all of their work. So one suggestion I would make is think about students' sleep, knowing that they're going to be turning in their work at the last minute. And would it make a difference for their sleep and their mental health and their general well-being to say, make their assignments due at 7 p.m. or 4 p.m., and if that works with how you're teaching, then it could be really beneficial for students, not just now, but like I was saying, kind of in normal times too.
Interesting. I have to say that's got me thinking, because I've given them until midnight, and if they're all just going to stay up until midnight, as a matter of course, that is worrisome.
Scott, I set my standard due date for my sophomores to be 5 p.m. on Fridays, which I thought was a very polite time. And, turn it in, and then you got your Friday night to go do whatever you do. I got a lot of complaints. It's like, why did you switch it from 11:59? I stuck to my guns, and I think it was good. But
oh yeah. Well, I think that they probably want that extra time, but by you sort of intentionally setting those due times in a way that can allow them to manage their own lives better, even if they don't think it's better for them, then I think that it's beneficial in the long run.
I do think I wanted to tie together, by the way, I'm Becca Scott. I don't think I've met you before, but I work for the Center for Teaching and Learning. And tying together something that Wendy said about talking about the homework before you do it. I also think if you're going to change the due date, to talk about it, like at this sort of transparency of, this is why I'm doing this. And you can list some studies about how time management skills are what we know that they're working on, right? And that you're helping them build some really important skills for their future career. It's just, I really like that transparency of, this is why I'm doing it this way. Because it actually is in a different amount of time. You probably give them a week for their homework, whether it's Friday at 5 to Friday at 5 or Friday at minute to, they have the same amount of time, but I do think they like that sort of late night cramming, but it's just not a good habit to build.
Becca.
Can I go ahead? I'm sorry.
Al, go ahead.
Can I suggest, with 8 faculty here, there are 8 experiments going on right now. And I think that being able to collate this data and make sense of it is really valuable. And we're probably all approaching our experiments differently as well. And I don't think anybody is doing the experiment wrong, frankly, because we're in uncharted territory. So the way I've been approaching this, I found success last spring in our undergraduate circuits course in developing these video lectures. Now we're all doing video lectures, frankly, through slides. And I've just tried to amp up what I did last year, which seemed to be successful, which is just really put a lot of effort into these slides. And I got to be honest with you, between that and the other usual work, the research, the proposals, etc., it has worn me down. Bob, thank you for suggesting going to Hawaii. I think I'm going to take you up on that suggestion. Not with you. I'll do it with my wife.
So Maui is closed, but the Big Island is open. Is my advice.
Yes, it's been a lot of work. But so to get back to the point, what I've been doing is more of the same, but being a lot more, I guess, as much as I can, of the recognition of what the students are going through, and just being a lot more lenient when they slip. Not overtly reducing what we're teaching, not recognizing in some sense that, well, we can all be a little less what you'd call attentive and everything like that, and learn less material because of this situation we're in. But privately, not publicizing it, just, when a student slips and they just somehow can't make an exam, I figure out a way for them to retake it. When they don't turn in their homework, I figure out a way for them to make it up in some reasonable way. And I think we're going to get through our regular material in good form that way. I've also been every day spending 30 seconds just reminding them that we're in a crazy situation, and they are experiencing something that only people do in several generations, perhaps. And they're all part of the solution as well. I keep reminding them that it's everyone who's going to help get us out of this by distancing, masks, vaccines, a whole 9 yards. I think the class is holding up. I think they're doing a great job. The other thing I've been doing is I'm congratulating them for doing what they're doing. Today, we got through Maxwell's equations for the first time, seeing all of them, building them up from, first principles. And my comment to them was, hooray, you have seen and stuck with a long evolution of thought to get to this point. So I'm trying to be as congratulatory as possible. So anyway, that's my experiment.
So William, what I've been doing is, that I've been doing the weekly wellness events activity with my students, but I've also been really doing a lot of publicizing of wellness activities throughout campus. And last night there was a wellness pillar event that I think it was a college. I'm not quite sure if it was campus that was put on. And one of my students is actually actively involved with that, which was got me really aware of that. What was great was this is the second one of the two that they had planned for the semester. And when I publicized it to the students during lecture, there was a lot of comments coming on the chat that said, oh, the first one was fantastic. You definitely should go. And so I was really excited because so many other students were saying, hey, the first one was great. You should go. I'm looking forward to going and seeing it. So I've been trying to make sure I publicize all the wellness events around campus that are available.
Excellent.
Keith, do you think that's something you'll keep doing?
I'm planning to keep on the wellness events or the activities. I'm planning to do that every semester now.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it's a worthwhile 15 minutes a week. Since I have a lab class, it's a little easier to fit in because I have these two 110-minute sessions. But I think it's a worthwhile 15 minutes a week to do. So the students seem to be appreciated.
Yeah.
What about workload? What have you done in terms of workload? Have you maintained kind of a steady course, or have you modified? Or
I supported the spring pause. I took one entire assignment out, and other than that, it's I've kept the rest of it. The workload is the same because I have certain learning outcomes I want to make sure that I achieve. But I thought this one was I like, but it's not as necessary as the other one, so I threw that one out. I'm not quite sure how much it really helped because I tell my students is, I know you guys are making economic decisions. And when I say economic decisions, you're taking a look at what is due next, right? And I'm going to work on what's next. And after I finish that, I'm going to go, what is the next thing to do? And I feel like, I don't know if there was enough reduced workload from all the classes that they really felt anything. Because I still feel like what Scott was saying, my one assignment went from 2 to 3 weeks because I got rid of that one because of spring slowdown. And I was really upset that at week 2.5, because I have checkpoints that they can actually check to see how far they are at each week. And they had not even accomplished what was due 2 weeks ago, week one. I think they just, economic decision was, okay, Keith delayed his assignment another week. That's fine. I'm just going to not start it until the week before it's due. And so I think a lot of them had a lot of pressure because they started my class, because I was lenient. I don't necessarily know that it really helped them out, because
it links back to what Scott was saying, that it's not about giving them rope and then they use it to climb the hill. It's just about, you give them rope and it piles up, and then, they use it at the last, from 11:50 to 11:59.
Yeah.
And which is troubling, because I found the same thing.
Yeah. I talked to a professor from the CS department on Monday, and we both agree that we're not quite sure what we did to try to reduce the workload actually really helped. It's sort of like, isn't there this law that, no matter how busy your actual work is, you can make it seem like you're really busy. You always feel busy. Even if your job isn't busy, you will feel busy because you'll find ways of making it to fill in the gaps. And so, I'm not quite sure. We might have all made it more lenient, but somehow I think the students found ways of filling in the gaps, and it still was pretty stressful for them.
So let me go. I'll say what I did. And so I did two things that I would continue. I'm very happy. One thing that kind of worked out, and one thing that I'm really ambivalent about. So one thing I did, and I've said this before, is I started these email journals. And I did that in my class of 55, and I'm doing it in my small seminar. And the journals, monthly journals, have been great. And it is work for me. I mean, it's just like, okay, tonight I'm going to answer 50 journals. But it has brought me closer to my students than I feel like I've ever been. They, the first journal, they're like, well, this is graded and I'm not going to say anything. And yes, I like the course, Dr. Kuskin. But by the third journal, I feel like we are really into some intellectual stuff, or they are telling me and working through some really personal stuff. And I've seen that as great. So I will continue to do journaling and play with how I work it in. A second thing that I've done is I began to front load the creative aspect of my course. My course isn't a fiction writing course or essentially a comic making course, but it has become more of that. And English departments always have a division between analysis and creation. And I've really tried to blur that. And boy, has that been great. It has brought them out. They have all reported feeling like they're exercising creative muscles that they haven't used in the past. They've all overcome fear of drawing. Who doesn't have a little fear of drawing? They've all overcome it, and they're doing great work. So that has meant that I've had to cut back on content in order to expand the discussion of that. And it's been a real decision for me, and something I've wrestled with, right? Because there are things I want to cover, but it has shifted the course, even the lecture, much more student-driven. And I would say it has helped all my students during this time. So I will continue to go down that road. I teach writing a specific way, and I cut back on my number of writing assignments. I am ambivalent with that decision. It is not like Wendy said, where she figured out what she could cut and felt good about it. It is more like, these are hard, the students are pressurized, but you know what? You become a good writer by doing a lot of writing. And that is a decision I'm not really comfortable with that I made. I wouldn't redo it. I wouldn't second guess myself in that it was too much work. They were drowning. They weren't doing great writing. So in the future, I may switch to in-class writing, which would cut back on the content more. Or maybe we'll be out of COVID and everyone will relax and have time to write. But that's just a very ambivalent thing. The last thing I did is I have used the journals to really talk about shyness and participation and group and self-presentation within the group. And I've driven my group of engineers who don't want to talk into a great, I think a great community. And I'm very proud. And I just want to echo Al. I tell them pretty much every class, I have 100% participation out of them. And I tell them that they did great. And sometimes I feel like, Jesus, Kuskin, enough with this praise. It's embarrassing, but I don't think it is. I think it's wonderful, and celebrating them is great. And if you believe what they say in their journals, many of them are very frightened of speaking in public and feel like they chose a route in which they could deal with numbers silently in spreadsheets rather than make up things in public and stand by their opinions. So I take them at their word. This is hard for them, and I praise them for triumph. So Jay and Frank, welcome. Jay, I liked Al's sense that we have a number of experiments going on here. What are you thinking? What have you done, and what would you redo?
Yeah. So I guess building off of Ali, what you put in the chat about due dates, I've been having a similar flexible close of eyelids type thing, but even extending a little bit more and saying, hey, this is the real work, getting a little bit more real worldy and say, well, let me know as if I'm your client when you're going to get this to me based upon changing things and turning into a communication exercise for them to manage their own time and to set that a due date for themselves. So I've left it at 11:59 p.m. on a Friday. I know some students need that, but I've given them all the option, and I've communicated that really thoroughly that they know they can request an extension. It just needs to be, it can't be within a certain number of hours before the deadline. So I've mentioned that to a couple of you that have been here in the past, but just for everyone. So I found that to work well, and I think I'd like to continue that. What was that, Wendy?
Well, I was going to ask you, do you ever have students that take that to an extreme? I have had one student who did that and was so far behind. I asked him when he was going to get in his work, and he kept saying, I'll get it in, not getting it in. So I finally had to say, here's when they'll be due and you have no extension, because he's just butting up against the end of the semester. And now it's become a boundary issue for me.
Yeah. I guess I set it up as you need to propose a deadline and then I will approve it.
Oh, I like that. So
that way it's more of a communication to avoid that situation that you just said. And
okay.
I found that to work really well. I've had no one take advantage of it. They all are very gracious. And that's probably the biggest feedback I've gotten. I've heard it from my colleagues as well, as students have really appreciated that leniency. And so that's something I think I'll continue doing for some classes, not the senior design where there is a deadline. And if you don't get it by the deadline, you're not going to get the job. And that's one where I'm towing the, graduates and then some sophomores. So that's been working well. But I guess in terms of end of the semester things that I've been doing is, again, providing more structure. I like to throw students into the deep end and then throw them lifelines and pull them out is sort of my pedagogy. That's not working right now. I threw them in the deep end, could not get them to participate, could not work to build up the concept I was working to build up because they're just tired. And so I've transitioned my teaching method around, okay, I'm going to really scaffold you and really build you up so that you can go answer this very clearly defined homework problem. And it's cut and dry at the end of the semester. So I guess I've echoed that. That's something I've been taking in. And then I also designed the final projects to be interesting for the students. So making it more open-ended to allow them to propose a final project, and then spending a lot more time with one-on-one, forcing them to come meet with me, really making that human connection around it, not having it just be Zoom, because the Zoom fatigue, I know we all feel it, but the students are really feeling it. And trying to make it, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk through something, and having it have it be more personal, have it be a more personal teaching experience from my end. So we're jumping into that and spending more one-on-one teaching time or one-on a couple students who work on something similar. And that's how I'm going to be structuring the last couple weeks.
That's great, Jay. I really think it seems like you figured out a way to let them participate in their own structure, but not just cut them adrift. It's great.
So if I could contribute something to follow on what Jay just said. So I'm not teaching this semester, but I taught the last fall semester. And thinking about the sort of the number of assignments and maybe being more lenient and kind of cutting things back or not. One of the things I found that worked really, really well in my class in the fall. So I was teaching the Divine Comedy and I allowed the students to miss a certain number of their assignments because I knew that, everybody had things going on. Some people had family members that were getting sick. Everything was so up in the air in terms of when we're going to be having class on Zoom versus in person or whatever. But I gave them a COVID-related makeup assignment that they really, really enjoyed that ended up being super successful. And what that was is I told them that they could choose to replace a number of the assignments they had missed if they created a COVID mask that was inspired by a character or an episode from the Divine Comedy, and they had to present it to the other students. And it was actually really super fun. I mean, I think that they appreciated the flexibility. They appreciated being able to say, okay, I'm going to not do this quiz or these two quizzes because this on, but I get to engage in this kind of like really interesting creative exercise that actually speaks to the moment, but is also related to what we were doing in class. And I thought that was really cool. I think they really appreciated it, and all of the students ended up making their COVID masks. I mean, it was a little like crafty, but it was awesome, and they really appreciated it.
It was funny. I actually did a lot of COVID contests last semester and had very low uptake. And I took it to be, and I backed them up with like gift cards down at the comics shop and, make a COVID mask that looks like your favorite superhero and go get a gift card. And I had very little uptake, and I took it to be just how stressed they were that, $10 gift card was not enough motivation because they needed to get whatever. So it's interesting. I mean, I appreciate what you did. I tried it a little less successfully. It was interesting.
Well, it was not, I mean, I think maybe the reason why I've found success with this is because it was a kind of grade replacement strategy, right? And so, I mean, they knew that like, okay, something was going on and I missed, our sort of biweekly ID quiz, but that's okay because then I can do this other thing. And I think knowing that they had that sort of that safety net helped them get through.
Scott, you're breaking up for me. So Frank, Nick, we've been talking about strategies that people have employed. Al suggested that, if we all just share what our strategies are. And overall, I think we've been wrestling with three large categories. One is simply redoing the workload and winnowing down to the essence of the course. A second has been structuring time management. And that's a problem because unless you rigorously structure it, sometimes students just take the slack you give them and make a noose. And however, giving students some agency within a structure seems very effective. A third, coming from Al, is clarity and praise, really trying to refine your teaching materials, but also praising success and supporting just how difficult and unique this time is. Nick, Frank, other thoughts that you've used in teaching?
Well, I taught last spring. I haven't taught since then. And my class, the homework problems don't make a lot of sense because they're either trivial or impossible. And so I assign two papers a week to read, one of which correlates with the text and one of which does anything they want. And I had class small enough that I could go over them in class. And so we'd comment on what they'd written in class pretty regularly. Now, once COVID hit and went remote, it worked for all but 6 out of the 8 students. But 2 of the students wound up with additional activities that it basically did not do nearly as well in the course as they might have. And one of them wound up with a crash project dealing with COVID, and she basically pretty well dropped out of the class and barely finished the final. And another one just didn't manage to keep the contact that I had with him when after class almost every day. So yeah, it's different, and I'm sitting in. I don't know whether I'll be teaching a year from now or not, but and it's keeping them engaged is interesting. But one of the questions I had on the paper, since we were looking at the effects of weak electric and magnetic fields on biological systems, and one of the questions that I ask on almost every paper is, what's wrong with this paper? And for the biologists, they usually don't know the physics, and for the physicists, they don't know the biology. And they can almost uniformly say the exposure data is lousy. But anyway, the comments I've gotten back on the class have been that by asking what's wrong with the paper, they wind up reading the literature differently than they have previously. So that's just some comments.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, in my class, I'm not teaching this spring, so my basis is last fall, and I definitely had to make some changes, and I'd say I made a kind of a combination of what you mentioned, William. Is one is trying to narrow it down to the core, where I took away some material that was at the end of the semester that it's a nice to have, but it's not absolutely necessary. And then kind of impromptu throughout the semester, I found that we just moved slower than normal. And we were an in-person class. We met 4 times a week. It was a lab-based class. We met 4 times a week, and 3 out of the 4 are in person, and we moved slower than normal. And so I ended up cutting a project, and I ended up, what I would do on kind of this agency side is I'd assign a project, and I see, look, how are we going to do? Like, let's see how we do, and then I'll assign the due date. And the students ultimately didn't really like that. They prefer just a due date. And the other thing that I really didn't do a good job on, and it showed in the student feedback, is because the schedule was getting shifted, and because I try to be empathetic to the students and we're not as far as we want to, let's move the due date, and things are kind of shifting throughout the semester. I didn't do a good job of staying up on the schedule and updating the schedule as we went. And the students really wanted that, which is understandable. But that's definitely something that I'm taking away from the COVID times is update that schedule, keep that schedule updated, give students due dates so that they can plan ahead and put it on their calendar and fit it into all their other assignments. All very understandable and reasonable things that I definitely learned coming out of this semester.
Thank you for being so candid. That is it. Structure, it turns out, is really a complicated key to this puzzle. I want to go back to your sense of slowing down. Was that entirely negative, or was it also, I don't want to be Pollyannish here, but was there also a sense that in slowing down, there was clarity? Or was it just that you were slowing down because everybody was sluggish, overwhelmed, and worn out?
Well, I think that there's definitely aspects of both. I think by slowing down, I made sure that they understood and they had time to try to process and understand the important topics that we were on. And, if I would have forced through, then they would have not done as well on the assignment. They would have just been rushing to get it done rather than actually understanding it. But then I think there's just an aspect of, there was a lot going on, right? I mean, we're in the pandemic, there's a lot going on. We're trying to figure out this remote learning as we go. A lot of my students were seniors, and so then they're trying to figure out senior design in a remote capacity as we're going. It's just, I think it was a combination of both.
Yeah.
I wanted to jump in on something that that Frank said about the question that you ask and how the students read, just because I totally thought William would enjoy this, but I got this book recently. I haven't read it yet, but it's called Creating Wicked Students, which I think is maybe just a marketing ploy to get you in. But it does talk about helping students with what are like wicked problems, or like developing the problem solving skills. And what it made me think about is if we're reducing content, but focusing on skill building, then we're not reducing rigor, right? Or expectations. And so I think about that in terms of like, what's the work world they're going into? Like if they're going into a work world that expects them to be content experts, then we have to make sure they're content experts. But I don't think that's what I'm hearing about the new work world. It feels to me like students are expected to be able to be flexible, learn quickly, know how they learn best, ask for help, right? The asking for help piece is really important, that I don't know that they really learn if they're in sort of this constrained environment where they have to be experts, then they're not willing to go through the productive failure piece. So I was curious if that could be a way to reduce content, is to think more about skill building. And maybe that's where the slowing down gets deeper. I think you were talking about that, William, in your class, like maybe there's a slowing down, but a depth or quality to what we're doing. That maybe they are motivated for. I think all these little relationship moments do motivate students, checking in and giving these affirmations of how they're doing or acknowledging this moment's tough. I think that motivates. So then I think if they're more motivated, they still want the high expectations in place, right? I don't think they really want you to reduce your expectations, but maybe there's a way with less content that they can get deeper and build the skills that then they feel they really transfer to the next class or the next thing.
Thank you for that, Becca, because that language, skill building, or kind of an analytic framework versus content knowledge, I think is a really powerful way of talking about this. We only have 14 minutes left, and I would like us to think seriously about what we can do in the last 2 weeks to get our students to the finish line, not in a kind of total loss mode. We've talked about about adapting our curricula over the course of the semester, but we're coming to the end now, and I suspect our students are stressed beyond belief. What can we do for ourselves as well? I mean, we're stressed beyond belief. What can we do in very pragmatic ways?
I was going to comment a little bit on a different topic, somewhat, is that I found a need to match to the class. Every class has a different personality. I've had one class that went backwards faster through the material than I could, and it was almost impossible to go forward. I've had in other classes where the best I could do to keep up with them. So and every class seems to have a personality. And I find matching to that is an important part of it.
Super important point. Super important point.
William, I'm going to offer something, and that is there's nothing that settles 4 hard years or so of work like a commencement. If you don't have a commencement, something's missing out of your undergraduate experience. I think the students over the last year in these courses need sort of like mini commencements. Ways of saying at the end of the semester that you may not know this, but you have passed an amazing experience in good form and have stepped up this ladder of understanding to a much higher level than you started at. And you did it in circumstances that no one could have predicted. And so that's the way I think I'm going to approach the end of the semester, celebrating what they've done.
Al, that's beautiful. And I too, I actually set out an evening, we call it Senior Appreciation Night, to all get together, and I call out the seniors in the class who are graduating, because after all, what do these people have to mark their super success? And because I've read all their journals, I try and give a little speech for each of the seniors and reveal some point. But Al, your point has consistently been recognize what they're going through. And that's brilliant. I think that is the chart topper of what we need to do. And Frank, your point that each class is different is really true. And you have to tune to that class.
So if I could make one last contribution, I just wanted to say, I completely agree with you, William. There's another sort of category of topics that we've been talking about, which has to do with intentionality and communication and relationship building with the students. And since it's the end of the semester, I mean, there's, your course design is already in place. Students are finishing up, they're taking their final exams or doing their final projects, whatever. So, I mean, there's not pedagogically a tremendous amount, that could be changed right at the moment. But one thing I think that everybody could do is be really open and communicative about why you're asking the students to do what you're asking them to do. And this has to do with, this alignment between the learning outcomes and what you're asked, and the assessments, what you're telling them to do. Because if students know why they're doing what they're doing, then it makes it easier for them and sort of, I think, psychologically easier to get that work done if they understand why they're doing it. So it's not just random busy work. It's not just, cramming all night long for a summative final assessment that they're really unclear about why they're doing it in the first place, because there's so much else that's happening. So, I mean, if you can really explicitly tell students, I'm asking you to do this thing because this is what you were meant to learn, and this is how you're going to prove to me that you've learned it, then they understand why they're doing or why they're doing what they're doing, and it doesn't seem like it's a pointless exercise or or why are they doing this instead of this other thing, right? So that's the last thing that I wanted to say is just communicating to the students very clearly why you're asking them to do what you're asking them to do helps their learning experience, and it sort of justifies to them the work that they're putting into it.
I guess I want to pile on to what Scott said. My biggest takeaway from this year has been that it's more important than ever to really follow all the theory of education, of how to structure a course, have clear learning outcomes, have lectures tied to those outcomes, no drinking from a fire hose, cut all the extraneous stuff, be very straightforward and organized. And when the students are at a distance or all alone, they need that organization even more than ever. And having a really organized Canvas site that has all of that, I mean, it is, I think, something my Canvas sites were more organized than ever this year. And frankly, there's more work. And that, to me, was the biggest increase in teaching work. And it's not that I don't try to do all that under normal circumstances. I think I have organized courses, but it was clear there was a need for more organization than ever. And also, when we talk about piling on or cutting material, I would say the students do want the rigor and they do want the material, but you have to cut everything, all the extraneous stuff, and just be clear. Lecture, here's this week's topic. Here's what we're going to lecture on it. We're going to have homework on it, and that's it. And cut everything else. So at the end of the semester, I see that that's just as important as ever. Students are coming up on exams. Let's be really clear on what the exam is and not pile a giant volume of material on the students, but focus on a few good things.
Really well said. Becca, I want to kind of prod you a little bit. Do you have any thoughts about the end of the semester in terms of wellness? Are there any kind of practices that you'd want to underscore? Any words of caution?
Well, this is just bizarre timing because we just got a request from the chancellor's office yesterday to prepare something for people because I think there's a lot of concern about unrest next week as the Chauvin trial comes to an end. And I think so we did just prepare some things. I'm going to put it in the chat for people around like helping students manage still residual effects from the shooting at King Soopers and the sort of social unrest around the police right now. And I think you can't underestimate that some students are unmotivated because of that. And I think it just underscores everything that was said here today, that transparency and structure is so important, because I think their brain's a little bit fried, so that the more you can lead them in more than you would normally, like more messages, more communication, more clarity. But I loved all the conversation today about relationship building. I'm noticing what we're hearing in terms of what students are complaining about as faculty, they're just moving on as if nothing's happening. So I think that's sort of just taking a moment to acknowledge what's going on, that this is hard, that there's a lot of uncertainty in the future, and that can be challenging, and give them these resources so that if they do need to go talk to somebody or do these wellness events that Keith was talking about, there are some great resources on our campus. But I don't know that we always signal that as much as students need, because we think they're getting it in an email or somewhere else. But using a little bit of class time for it, I think is really valuable if you can.
Yeah, I don't think I can sum up better than between Becca and Bob's statement about cutting extraneous, clarity in organization, and then relationship building. I guess the thing I would like to end us on is just thinking about our own self-care at this point. And, we're all professionals, and none of us are high school age, right? So we've been through a lot in life and faced our own crises and worked through them. Nevertheless, it's not only our students who are fried. It's not only our students who have had a hard semester and witnessed things close to home that are beyond the pale. And I think we all need to acknowledge that this is a tough one, and reach out to our own confidants and share candidly what's going on. And this is a time for summoning up strength, but it's not simply a time for grinding yourself down, because we don't know what lies ahead. So I just wanted to end us by saying that there's no question in my mind that everything we've talked about is essential for our students, particularly building relationships with them in whatever way your class allows. It's hard in a 300-person class to build individual relationships, obviously. So maybe that just means having a chance for you to say a word or two about, as Al said, about the tremendous effort of this semester, and acknowledge what it is. But I also just want to end us by saying, you're all doing great work. Everyone's showing up here. This is a good turnout. I'm incredibly proud of you all. You're doing great work. And it is no cowardice to turn to a friend or take a morning off, heaven forbid, and relax. Wendy and I joked at the beginning of this session about some shopping therapy. That's okay. It is okay. It is okay to sleep late. It is okay. And, I have no authority to tell you to sleep late, but we've got to take care of ourselves, because others rely on us. And the game ain't over on May 5th. I mean, we don't know what lies ahead, and teaching is going to go on, and the university is going to go on, and we're a great community. So I wanted to end us by acknowledging just that we are each bearing this pressure. We're bearing it well. We should be proud of ourselves, proud of our community, and be sensitive to our own personal needs at this time. With that, my friends, I wish you the greatest success. Please come back April 30th. I'd like to spend April 30th a little bit on logistics. What would be great to deliver to the college over the summer, at the middle of August when we move into the next semester, and then what would be helpful moving forward? Let's hope that fall is a celebration of community. So onwards, I wish you all the best.
Thank you, William.